Her mother has written a book called For Laci. Sharon Rocha joins us live here in New York. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Greta.
Ready to do this?
Yes, I am.
We've been talking about this for a number of years.
For a long time.
You've written this book For Laci. Hard to write?
It was extremely difficult to write. When I decided to do this, I just didn't realize how difficult it would be. I thought I could do it.
You know, we have such a different view on the outside looking in. The book gives us that inside look.
Yes, that's what I tried to do. I wanted to let people know Laci. We'd had many, many requests, many cards and letters from people saying that they would like to know Laci, know more about her.
The book is very personal. I mean, you talk about your own life. You talk about life with Laci, Scott, with Ron. I mean, it talks about the whole thing, the trial. But the sort of overriding theme is the pain.
Yes.
Doesn't go away, does it?
It does not go away. No, I've been asked, how do you get through this? How I've gotten through it, basically been my family and my friends who have been absolutely wonderful. I'll never get over it, though.
How often? I mean, is it every single day, I imagine?
Yes, it is. It is. I think about her every day.
You know, you and I have talked. I mean, holidays are bad, and even, I mean, you and I even talked before that I said when the trial was over, that's when it really sort of sets in. You lose your mission. That's
it exactly. This Christmas seemed to be the most difficult for many of us, in my family, her friends, and I think that's part of the reason.
Why did he do this? Why did Scott do this?
I don't know. I wish I did know. There's no reason. There is no reason. There's no logical reason as to why he did this.
Do you remember the first time you met him?
Yes, I do.
Where did you meet him?
I met him in Morro Bay at the cafe that he worked at. Very nice, very personable, such a gentleman, very well-mannered.
Laci crazy about him, no doubt?
Absolutely, absolutely. She had already gone out with him a couple times before I met him. But she called and said, "Mom, I've met the man I'm going to marry."
It's sort of interesting in the book. You write about how even in the first days after she disappeared, when you were suspicious of Scott, you felt bad because you thought, if Laci comes home and knows that I suspected her husband.
Right. And I can't really say that it was like a major suspicion. I think a lot of it was subconscious at first, and then as time went on, as the days passed, I just became more and more aware of how unusual I thought his behavior was. I mean, he didn't react like so many of us were. The panic, the need to find her immediately. I never once heard him say, and I felt he would have said this to me. We were always very close, but say, "Mom, I don't know, why would anybody take Laci? Where could she be? What has happened to her?" I never heard him say anything like that. And I don't know if anybody has said it to.
When you met him first, did you like him?
I did. I liked him very much.
What was it about him?
All the things I just said. He was just a very congenial, well-mannered, polite, very attentive towards Laci, and Laci was absolutely crazy about him. He always called me Mrs. Rocha until the day they were married. Then it was Mom from then on.
When do you think he decided to do this? Was this a planned murder?
I do feel it was premeditated, absolutely. And all I can do is, you know, put out my own theory. I've read that I know a lot of people have called Scott a sociopath, and I've read where sociopaths can go on for years and years as if everything is normal in their lives, and then all of a sudden they're backed into a corner, and that may cause something to snap. And I feel personally that that corner came on December 6th when Sean Sibley asked him if he was married.
You know, when you go through the facts, when you have when he was confronted with the marriage by that woman, and then you have, I think it was on the 9th or the 12th when the boat was bought.
The 9th.
The 9th the boat was bought.
The reason I say I think that was his corner was because the very next day is when he started searching the internet for about the tides in the Bay Area, and the following day on the 8th was he searched the internet for a boat, and the day after that on the 9th is when he bought it. And that's also the same day that he told Amber Fry that he had lost his wife and this would be his first Christmas without her.
You know, as you listen to the facts, I mean, to jump ahead a little bit, I was at the sensing when you said, you know, why didn't you just, you know, divorce is an option. You didn't have to murder.
Absolutely. It is an option.
So it's, I mean, it's just really...
I don't know. I think something has gone awry here where so many men feel that murder is their only option out of a marriage. And I think they need to realize it's time to stop murdering our daughters.
Well, the other thing that's so profoundly difficult, and God knows, it's so much easier for me, is that it appears that Laci never saw it coming. I mean, that does not appear...
I know she didn't see it coming. I know she didn't.
That it would suddenly, it just... That's the worst, you know.
It is.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with much more. Sharon, of course, stand by.
Possibly describe the ache in my heart or the emptiness in my life. I know that someone knows where Laci is, and I'm pleading with you, please, please, let her come home to us.
That's, of course, Sharon Rocha in January 2003, just 1 month after her pregnant daughter Laci disappeared. And, of course, we are back with Sharon. Sharon, by that date, January 23, you knew what had happened.
Yes. Well, I wasn't sure exactly what had happened, but I knew that Scott was responsible for it. I knew Laci wasn't coming home alive.
You don't even to this day know the details. I mean, you write about that in the book, that it's almost sort of an incomplete aspect. Do you need to know?
I think the only thing that I want to know is that she didn't know what happened. I don't need to know the details.
Does it sort of do you sort of understand, like Beth Holloway Twitty has no information about her daughter at all?
That is just devastating to me. I know how I was those 4 months until Laci was found, and I just can't imagine what she's going through.
The media was all over this story, and this year, go ahead and punch us in the face. I was probably the worst offender of all, so this is your big chance. Give us some idea. What were we like? Were we something were we a problem? Were we something that...
In the beginning, it was absolutely great because it just kept Laci going. It kept her face out there. Even though I knew that Scott was responsible, in the back of my mind, I still had that sliver of hope that she would come home. So it was great, like I said, keeping her picture out there, her face, people looking for her. And to be honest with you, most of the time, it wasn't a problem. There were a few times that it was a problem when I'd hear things that I didn't want to hear about or hear things that were reported incorrectly.
One day, I showed up at Scott's house, Scott and Laci's house. I never dreamed you were there. You were there.
I didn't dream that you would have been there either.
Well, no, I know. Neither one of us did. I felt badly when I saw you, and of course, at first, your friends sort of ran interference. I mean, it was a rather awkward exchange. Was that is that the horrible part when we just sort of show up?
Yes, it is. It is unexpected, but at that time, we were there cleaning the yards. We were taking care of the yard, pulling weeds. Everybody had mud in their hands. And we'd been approached before, and not necessarily by the media, but through the fence. I don't know if you remember how the fence was. You could see through the fence, and we would see people coming up the driveway.
In terms of some of the you watched some of the shows. You even write in the book about, in fact, that you're watching the shows at night. Were the shows more painful to you?
In the beginning, I keep saying in the beginning because all of this was, it was just surreal. And it was actually, it's kind of hard to describe it, but a distraction for me. It was like, okay, there's Laci. I'm still looking at Laci. She's still alive. She's still out there. We need to bring her home.
We did a show one night on bait. And you write about in the book how you confronted Scott with what our experts said on the air.
Exactly. I turned to him and I said, what kind of bait did you use? And he just turned and looked at me over his shoulder and smiled, and his sister-in-law Janie said that he used a lure. And I said, well, was it at least shaped like a shrimp? Because your expert had said that you used live bait.
Mark Arger's his lawyer. And I've known Mark for years, and without any doubt, he walked into the courtroom with a swagger. Mm-hmm. What's your thought on Mark?
I didn't think very much of him, to tell you the truth. He really irritated me. I think in the beginning, he was very knowledgeable, Don't get me wrong. He knew what he was doing, and he was a great defense lawyer. I mean, he did everything he could to defend Scott, but it was his tactics. Of course, I've never been in a courtroom before. I didn't realize that a defense attorney can say anything or do anything to distract the jury. But I did not like the incident of the boat, the boat that he put in the parking lot with the dummy in it, the headless and legless and handless dummy. I thought that was very tacky.
I think he could have gone without the sort of the joking in the
absolutely
the court in front of you with his client. I mean, I don't think defense lawyers realize, just who's in the courtroom and what they see. We're going to take another quick break. Sharon, stand by. Coming up, former Vice.
Without them, there's a huge void in my life. I literally get sick to my stomach when I allow myself to think about what may have happened to them. No parent should ever have to think about the way their child was murdered.
That's Sharon, of course. In April 2003, just after the bodies of Laci and Connor washed ashore and Scott Peterson was arrested for the murder, Sharon Rocha has joined us again live in New York. Sharon, throughout this entire book, we've woven within it as this crying, this grief, the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's just like it never stopped.
No, and it still hasn't stopped. I feel that Scott not only murdered Laci and Connor, the Scott that's in prison murdered my son-in-law also.
You loved him.
I loved Scott. I loved him.
What was it like looking at him across the courtroom?
The person I was looking at wasn't my son-in-law most of the time. It was very difficult for me the day the prosecutors gave their closing arguments in the guilt phase. I really had a difficult time that day because I knew that the jury was going out shortly to make a decision as to whether Scott was going to be guilty or not. And at that time, there are still sometimes, not nearly as many as it was at that time, but I'd have a hard time separating my son-in-law from the murderer.
Well, when you think about it, every conversation you had with him after he was in custody was a public one. I mean, from the witness stand.
Yes.
You've never been able to sort of sit and have a private, and you'll never be able to.
No.
I don't know what you would say then, but the relationship was, I would assume that you have a lot of sort of, undelivered things you'd like to say to him privately.
Right now I can honestly say that there isn't anything I want to say to him because that person is not the Scott Peterson that I knew.
What about his parents?
I haven't spoken to them since the trial.
During the trial, it seemed like there was some tension. But in fact, at one point, I think there was the problem with the home because I think Jackie and Lee said you couldn't go in the home and you wanted to reclaim some of Laci's items. At least it appeared from the outside that tension was growing.
Actually, what had happened there was I had been told several times that I could go into the home, and it would be next week when they would be there. And then when that day would arrive, I wouldn't get the phone call. So I finally just took it upon myself and said, okay, we're going in to get Laci's things, because they were slowly disappearing.
Did you have a good relationship with Jackie and Lee before Laci disappeared?
Yes, we did. We didn't know each other very well. We were acquaintances. They live in Southern California. We're in the Central Valley, so we saw them occasionally when they would come to visit Laci and Scott. But we did have a good relationship.
Sitting in the courtroom, it was, from the back of the courtroom, we'd see, on the right hand, we'd see Laci's family. On the left side, we see Scott's family. And you could see, it wasn't just Laci and Connor. You could see sort of the ripple effect of, the destruction was so vast.
Absolutely, absolutely. It didn't stop at the families. It spread out. There were friends, there were total strangers on both sides of the families.
Jackie, I've spoken to Jackie in the last 6 months, I can't remember when. She still believes her son's innocent.
And that's her prerogative, to believe that he's innocent. But we don't have to believe that.
Amber, hero?
I think Amber did a great job of recording the conversations between her and Scott. My own personal opinion, I think the the star witness was Craig Grogan. I think I saw a difference in the jury when Craig testified.
He was the one that sort of looped it all together, put all the pieces together at the end. He was the closer.
He was the closer. And I could see the expressions on their faces were like, okay, now I get it. Now I know what we've been listening to all of these months.
Were you curious what the jury was thinking throughout the trial? I mean, because you can't talk to them.
I was curious, of course. I was just hoping that they were understanding what was going on, because I certainly wasn't in the beginning.
So what do you watch? You watch Scott, you watch Garrigus, you watch the prosecutor, you watch the jury in the courtroom, or the judge?
I watched them all. I watched all of them. I took notes on everything.
We're going to take a quick break. Stand by. Has written a new book called For Laci. We're back with Sharon Rocha. Sharon, how are Amy and Brent doing? That's the Laci siblings.
They're doing fine. They are both back at work, and they're doing fine.
And Ron, who is, for all intents and purposes, Laci's stepfather, raised her.
Yes. He's known her since she was 2 years old.
He's out in the green room, out in
yes,
the waiting
he is.
room. He's fine, too. But it still takes its toll on them. I mean, they're fine, but there's a toll.
It absolutely takes its toll. None of us will ever be the same. Laci's always there with us. We talk about her all of the time. But there's something missing from all of us.
When we were paging through the book down, we're passing around the newsroom. I mean, the comment that was made is the smile. Mm-hmm. It's all anyone, people, I mean, people who don't know her. I mean, we talk about that giant smile.
And you can see from the pictures in the book, that was Laci.
That was a big smile.
Always had that smile on her face. She laughed, she giggled, she was happy.
Prosecution team, high marks?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They worked. How closely did they work with you?
I'm sure, they kept me at a distance as far as a lot of the information, because they just weren't allowed to give me information. But as far as working with us, they were the best. They were just the best. I mean, we talked to them on a daily basis, whether they wanted me to or not.
They've had some career changes, some of them.
Yes. Rick Testasso is now a judge.
That was the lead prosecutor.
He was the lead prosecutor.
We were hard on him.
Yes.
And so we apologize. Yes. He won the case. We were hard on him. That's what we lawyers, we're used to it, though.
Birgit Flatiger is running for district attorney.
Unopposed, or does she have an opponent?
She does have an opponent. We've been busy trying to raise funds and get her elected here. And Dave is still with the DA's office also, Dave Harris. So, and they've just been wonderful people. They really are.
What do you think of the judge?
I may have disagreed a couple times with him, but I think he was a great judge. He was very fair. He was very cautious. He made sure everything was done by the book. He obviously doesn't want any appeals, nor do any of us.
You had a little bit of someone's nose got out of joint about seating, though, one day. What happened? He was going to put you in the back of the courtroom, all the parents?
Yeah, with a little incident out in the hallway with the Petersons, which was actually a buildup of previous things that had happened.
Which is such a sad thing. Like the parents, like the two sets of parents who did nothing wrong, and you see them sort of having to file separately out of the courtroom, and we're all sort of cautiously keeping everybody separate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because there were comments that were made, as we would pass through the doors or walk down the hall. Quite often Lee would make a comment to us and tell it, it just came to the point, enough is enough. They obviously blamed us for Scott being there.
The detectives get very high marks too. I mean, you say in the book you write very, very warm things.
Yes. Craig Grogan, Al Brocchini, John Bueller, all of them did a wonderful job. They were the three. Craig was the lead detective, and the other two they were the three that we worked the most with.
I don't think people realize that sometimes the detectives, they get very personally involved in it.
Everyone involved in this case, well, I say everyone, but at least many of the people that I've talked to, those detectives and many others with the police department and the DA's office, all the prosecutors, they actually had to go through, I'll call it a decompression themselves when this was over. I mean, they were that involved. They spent 24/7. They spent almost a year away from their families.
And we were hard on them.
And you were very hard on them.
I'll take that. I'll take that as well. I'll do my penance. And finally, we only have about 30 seconds left for your friends.
The same thing. Friends and family. Everybody has suffered through this.
But they were there for you all the time.
They were there. I couldn't ask for better friends and family, or everybody who supported us, all the people who sent cards and letters. And
I think I got a few elbows from your friend Sandy to push out of the way as I was trying to move in. So I mean, I got a few of her elbows, and Patty. Everybody tried hard and did well.
Yeah, they did, absolutely.
The book is for Laci. It is selling like hotcakes. It really is a worthwhile read because you can really get the inside story about this horrible tragedy. So buy it, and you're going to learn a lot. Sharon, thank you. Always nice to see you.
Thank you.